They called it the land where gold grew like grass. Long before Europe's kings counted their coins, the Mali Empire's wealth flowed like a river. Gold dust in the air, golden ingots in the markets, golden crowns on the heads of rulers whose names crossed oceans on the lips of traders. By the 14th century, Mali stood as a beacon of prosperity, its power stretching from the Atlantic coast to the edge of the Sahara. Gold from its mines fueled empires far beyond its borders, changing the balance of power in lands that had never seen the Niger River. Even the Mansa's casual gifts could bend economies, flooding markets with wealth or starving them overnight. But gold does not lie silent. It speaks in promises, in temptations, in the quiet scratching of knives drawn in the dark. For every caravan that set out under the banner of trade, another shadow followed. Thieves, mercenaries, and rulers hungry for a share of Mali's treasure. In the empire's grand halls, alliances were sealed with silken smiles, yet broken in the desert wind. The richer the glow, the deeper the shadow that clung to it. And somewhere, hidden behind the glittering facade, there were whispers of a hoard so vast, so unimaginable, it could buy the loyalty of kings and the downfall of nations. 7 centuries later, those whispers have not faded. The trail remains, not cold, but waiting. And those who dare to follow it must understand, gold is never given freely, and some treasures will take far more than they give. In the heart of West Africa, where the parched breath of the Sahara met the lush green veins of the Niger River, an empire was born that would eclipse the wealth of kings and emperors across the known world. The Mali Empire did not simply trade in gold, it sat upon its very source. The earth itself seemed to bleed wealth into the hands of its rulers. From the mines of Bambuk and Bure came gold so pure it gleamed even in the dimmest light. Caravans laden with this treasure wound their way through the desert, guarded by warriors whose spears were as sharp as their loyalty. Salt, carved from the desert's depths, moved alongside it, worth its weight in gold to those who needed it to survive. Ivory, slaves, spices, and manuscripts followed the same routes, weaving Mali into the very fabric of global commerce. At its height, the empire's ruler, Mansa Musa, was spoken of as a living legend. His wealth was so immense that his pilgrimage to Mecca sent ripples through the economies of lands he had never seen before. Cities bowed to him not from fear, but from awe. He was a man who could change the fate of nations with a single gift, or ruin them with a careless gesture. But such abundance was not without consequence. The greater Mali's glow, the darker the shadows it cast. Foreign merchants coveted its riches. Distant kings plotted alliances or betrayals. Even within the empire's walls, ambition grew like a weed in fertile soil. Men who bowed to the Mansa by day whispered to one another at night, weighing the price of loyalty against the promise of more. And among these whispers was one that refused to die, a rumor of a hidden fortune, far greater than even the Mansa's known wealth. Gold hoarded in secret places, vaults concealed in deserts where no caravan dared to tread, a treasure so vast it could buy the allegiance of entire kingdoms. It was said that to seek it was to court death. Yet it was also said that once you heard of it, you could never truly stop searching. When Mansa Musa set out for Mecca in 1324, it was not merely a journey of faith, it was a declaration of power unlike anything the medieval world had ever seen. His caravan stretched farther than the horizon could hold. Tens of thousands of attendants, soldiers, scholars, and slaves. Camels groaned under the weight of gold so abundant that it seemed as if the sun itself had decided to travel with him. But Musa's pilgrimage was more than spectacle. It was disruption. In Cairo, he gave away so much gold that the value of the metal collapsed, rippling through the markets for years. Merchants rejoiced, then cursed. Kings watched with awe, then with envy. Mali's wealth was no longer a rumor. It was a threat. Yet every coin spent, every gift given, left behind more than just awe. It left a mark, a trail of expectation and greed. Rivals who once ignored the far-off empire now studied its borders, its trade routes, its weaknesses. For in gold, there is always the promise of more gold. What history does not often tell is that Musa's pilgrimage may have been more than devotion to God. Some whispered he carried with him not just gifts, but messages, secret negotiations, alliances to be forged in distant courts, deals written in ink and sealed with gold dust, and perhaps something else. For when he returned, he was no longer simply Mali's ruler. He was a man who had seen the scope of the world and understood that the world had now seen him. And in that moment, the Mali Empire's golden age did not just begin, it was set on a path that could never be undone. By the time Mansa Musa returned, Timbuktu had become more than a trading post. It was the heartbeat of Mali's mind and soul. Here, caravans brought not just gold and salt, but ideas, maps, and secrets bound in leather and ink. Scholars from across Africa, Arabia, and even distant Europe arrived to debate under the shade of mud-brick minarets, their words drifting like incense in the heat. But knowledge is never innocent. In the shimmering halls of Timbuktu's great libraries, manuscripts spoke of more than poetry and faith. They held maps drawn by travelers who claimed to have charted unknown rivers, ledgers that listed mines never marked on any official record, correspondence between rulers, where every word was weighed like a bar of gold. It was here that whispers began to take form, that somewhere in the empire lay a reserve of treasure so vast it could fund not only a kingdom, but an empire of empires, a hidden vault protected by oaths older than Musa himself. Some believed it was buried deep in the desert, others in the flooded caves along the Niger's bend, guarded by men who answered to no crown. And yet, for all the openness of Timbuktu's scholarly life, there were corners where the light of learning could not reach. Certain manuscripts were never read in public. Some were wrapped in cloth, their ink fading, their words forbidden. Only a chosen few could touch them, men who swore to protect their knowledge with their lives. Those who broke that oath were never seen again. Timbuktu was a beacon, yes, but every beacon casts a shadow, and in that shadow, the empire's greatest secrets were already being hunted. Mansa Musa's return from Mecca had filled Mali with awe, but awe does not last forever. Wealth, once paraded, becomes a burden. Gold bought loyalty, yes, but only for as long as the coin flowed. The courtiers who once bowed in reverence now whispered behind carved wooden screens. Governors in far-off provinces began to think less like servants and more like kings. The heart of the empire beat in Niani, but its veins stretched far into deserts and forests Musa could not patrol at once. Tribute caravans arrived slower, merchants argued over taxes, and minor chiefs started testing the limits of their independence. Gold could hold the empire together, but it could not mend the fractures that were spreading beneath the surface. Inside the royal palace, the air grew heavy with unspoken fears. Musa's brothers and sons eyed the throne, each calculating the moment when age or illness might weaken the lion. The king, for all his piety, began to surround himself with men whose loyalty was bought in gold rather than blood. Some were spies, others were assassins in waiting. Beyond the palace walls, a darker force was at work. Foreign traders arrived with gifts and smiles, but also with questions. Too many questions. They sought maps, measurements, and rumors about Mali's mines. Some claimed to be scholars, others holy men. But in truth, they were agents, sent by kingdoms across the sea who saw Mali's gold not as a marvel, but as a prize to be taken. Musa had built an empire that glittered in the sun, but in its glow, shadows had multiplied. In those shadows, alliances shifted like desert sand. And as history has shown, Empires are rarely taken from the outside. They are betrayed from within. The empire's borders, once guarded by loyal warriors, now became the front lines of quiet rebellions. In the northern deserts, Berber tribes who had once traded salt for Mali's gold began refusing tribute. To the south, forest kingdoms tightened their grip on trade routes, charging tolls where none had existed before. The lifeblood of Mali's economy, its caravans, was slowing, bleeding wealth into the hands of rivals. Inside Niani, the royal court had turned into a theater of deceit. Princes traded favors with generals, generals whispered into the ears of merchants, and merchants bribed scribes to forge documents, granting them monopolies on trade. Musa's grandsons, untested and impatient, eyed each other with open hostility. Each had their own faction, each claimed to know what was best for Mali. But the true danger was not in these petty squabbles, it was in the foreign powers watching from afar. Across the Mediterranean, in cities like Cairo and Fez, merchants carried tales of Mali's fading strength. Kings who had once feared to challenge Musa's authority began sending envoys and spies. Some came under the guise of trade missions, others as pilgrims or scholars. They mapped river crossings, noted the locations of garrisons, and quietly sought the empire's most guarded secret, the exact location of its richest gold mines. Worse still, whispers spread through the marketplaces that Mali's gold was not infinite, that the mines were running thin. Whether truth or enemy rumor, the effect was the same. Trust eroded, confidence in the empire's strength waned, and allies turned to opportunists. The empire was not yet broken, but the wind had shifted, and in the shifting sands of the Sahara, a single storm could bury an entire city. By the early 16th century, Mali's vast borders had begun to crumble like the edges of an ancient parchment. Cities that once rang with the sounds of trade now stood eerily quiet, their markets reduced to ghostly courtyards where only the wind bartered with the dust. One by one, Mali's outposts disappeared, not to war, but to neglect. With fewer soldiers to guard the roads, bandits grew bold. Merchant families who had served the empire for generations now hid their wealth, fearful of both foreign raiders and desperate neighbors. Yet amid the decay, a strange pattern emerged. Caravans, heavy, secretive, and under heavy guard, began to move quietly into the desert. They did not follow the usual trade routes. No goods were sold, no taxes paid. Entire expeditions would set off and never be seen again. To outsiders, these vanishings were the final proof of Mali's collapse. But in the villages, the old men spoke of something different. They told of a final decree from a dying king, a command to hide the empire's last great fortune, not in vaults or treasuries, but deep in the Sahara, where only the initiated could find it. Some swore they had seen strange markings carved into rocks far from any known road. Others claimed to have stumbled upon abandoned camel skeletons, still bound to rotting chests that had been emptied in haste. But no one could prove anything. The empire's name faded from foreign maps. To the outside world, Mali was gone. Yet the desert itself seemed to hold its breath, as though guarding a secret that would not be spoken for centuries. Centuries passed. The Mali Empire was remembered only in fragmented chronicles and the fading songs of griots. But the stories of the lost caravans, of gold vanishing into the desert, never truly died. They smoldered in the minds of dreamers, and sooner or later, dreamers become hunters. The first were 17th and 18th century traders, lured by rumors overheard in caravan camps. They followed vague directions whispered in marketplaces. 3 days east of the rock shaped like a lion, 2 wells past the place where the sand sings. Many never returned. Those who did came back sunburned, half-mad, and empty-handed, except for a few strange relics, scraps of silk not woven in Africa, coins stamped with symbols no one could read. By the 19th century, European colonial powers took notice. Expeditions were launched under the guise of geographic surveys or archaeological studies. In truth, many of these were treasure hunts backed by investors hoping for a fortune. Some came back claiming they had found abandoned watchtowers buried to their roofs in sand. Others told of maps hidden in old mosques, marked with coded symbols. None could agree on the location, and none had gold to show. In the modern era, the desert itself became a tool for the search. Aerial photographs revealed faint lines in the sand, trails long erased from memory. Satellite imagery suggested that ancient riverbeds, now dry, could have once led to hidden oases. And every so often, a discovery made headlines, a buried manuscript in Timbuktu hinting at a city of walls lost beyond the dunes. A cluster of gold dust-coated ingots found in a collapsed camel grave, fragments of jewelry with techniques unknown to local craftsmen. Yet each breakthrough only deepened the mystery. The clues were too scattered, the patterns too faint. The gold, if it existed, was still out there, waiting. But then, one discovery emerged from a forgotten library that promised not just a direction, but a destination. It was found by accident. In a dusty storeroom of an old Sahelian library, a scholar searching for medieval poetry came across a bundle of brittle parchment bound in goat hide. The script was elegant yet strange, Arabic at first glance, but with letters bent and broken in ways no scribe should have written. For months it was dismissed as a curiosity. Then a linguist realized it was a cipher, a code layered within a code. When the words were finally teased apart, they did not speak of poems or trade records. They spoke of a journey. The text described a caravan of 40 shadows that departed Timbuktu under moonless skies, each camel carrying the sun's weight upon its back. The path twisted through places named only in metaphor, the hill where the stars fall, the well that knows no bottom, and finally, the city that drinks the dunes. Accompanying the text was a crude diagram, neither quite a map nor quite an illustration. It marked no known river, no known settlement, but hinted at a ring of walls buried beneath shifting sands. In the margins, someone had drawn symbols, half astrological, half geometric, that some believed to be coordinates disguised as sacred patterns. If the translation was correct, this city that drinks the dunes was not a myth. It was the last refuge of Mali's royal gold, hidden when invaders closed in and the empire began to fracture. And if the code was to be believed, the gold had never been recovered. But there was one final warning scrawled at the bottom in hurried, almost frantic handwriting. Those who seek the city must carry water for the living and offerings for the dead. For the first time in centuries, the legend had a direction. But reaching it meant crossing one of the most lethal stretches of desert on Earth, where compasses spin, mirages deceive, and entire expeditions vanish without a trace. The manuscript's code was cracked. The whispers of a lost city had shape, and for a moment it seemed the 700-year riddle was about to be solved. But the desert has its own way of guarding secrets. The first modern expedition to follow the map disappeared. No distress signals, no wreckage. Only an abandoned camp found weeks later, tents shredded by wind, journals buried in drifts of sand, and a trail of footprints that ended abruptly, as if swallowed whole by the earth. Yet the mystery did not fade. Others tried. Some returned empty-handed, convinced the city was nothing but a mirage. Others came back with strange tales, colossal stone blocks barely visible under dunes, a half-buried gate carved with symbols matching those in the manuscript, and a hollow sound when the sand was struck, as if something vast lay beneath. Historians argue, treasure hunters scheme, and in the villages nearest to where the map points, old men still tell stories by the fire, of caravans that entered the dunes in silence, of gold so bright it burned the eyes, and of a curse placed by the last emperor, that the hoard would belong only to Mali's true heirs, and to no one else. If the city is real, then so is the treasure. But so is the warning. For every grain of gold taken without right, a grain of blood will be spilled. So the question remains, not just where Mali's gold is, but whether it should be found at all. And if one day it is unearthed, who will it belong to? The discoverer, the nation, or the empire that, though forgotten, has never truly died? Some say the answer lies beneath the sands. Others say it is better left buried.